Well, hi again, everybody. It's been a few weeks since I started this sequence of short videos about mental distancing. Life sort of kind of took over itself here for a few weeks, and it's still kind of ongoing. So, anyway, let's continue where we left off. So, a brief summary. There were 4 previous videos to this one. Mental distancing, part 1, video 2, video 3, video 4. The point of these videos were eventually the first goal really is to have you clearly see that thoughts are objects of perception. And the second goal was for you to become aware of your own awareness. And the third goal is to investigate where our supposed perceptions of what's out there arise. Where do they arise? So let's go back to the first one. So I used duality here because I had you notice a sound in your environment. Now, standard operating procedure for us as human beings is that we think these sounds, these objects of perception, are taking place out there. In the third video, I believe it was, I had you notice that they're actually arising or appear to be arising in our, for lack of a better phrase, open, spacious awareness. Admittedly, this is still dualistic, but the idea was that what's being perceived is not just out there, it's being perceived because it's arising within what I'm calling in here. There is no in or out. This is where it collapses into non-duality. We use language to talk about what's out there, what's in here. We say objects of perception, we say awareness, we say observer, observed, witness, witnessed, subjective, objective. These are dualistic phrases that ultimately collapse, which is going to be the point of the next sequence of videos in which I investigate the witness itself, the observer itself. Point is, the first thing that's really necessary for you is to first consider and examine and investigate and see for yourself that thoughts and feelings, whether it's tension in the chest or in your stomach, in your gut, they are 2 objects of perception. The mistake we human beings make is that if it's coming from another sense organ, we place it outside of ourselves. And I was just saying, okay, well, let's go with that for a little bit. Let's look at our thoughts. Well, notice that there's awareness of thoughts. So if where there's awareness of thoughts, then we can't possibly be the thoughts. Well, we are. They are. What we are includes those thoughts. But by looking at your thoughts as objects of perception, it allows us to create this mental distance. This is a separation, albeit artificial, but it's a separation so that we can now look at thoughts objectively rather than being captured by thoughts with the underlying assumption that those thoughts are us, that we are those thoughts that apparently arising is what we are, who we are. So that's kind of what video 1, 2, and 3 were all about. Now, also in those videos was to notice the noticer, to notice awareness, to become aware of awareness. Because if especially with thoughts, if we see thoughts as an object of perception, then the question arises, well, then what's observing the thoughts? Well, that's the same thing that's observing or hearing the bird calls outside, or the wind, or seeing, including this video that you're watching, that's seeing this, or feeling sensations on your skin, or tasting food particles that still remain in your mouth. So we create that mental distancing first to see thoughts or objects of perception just like anything else. But then we direct your attention to awareness. And once you can actually see and become aware of your own awareness, then this allows us to observe thought much more objectively than previously, allows us to create the separation between the thought. And then in the third video, I started to reintegrate all of that and show that whether the perceptions are coming from outside or thoughts are arising inside, all of those are arising in this open, spacious, boundless, I'm calling it awareness. It's just a word. Consciousness, awareness, sentience, emptiness, nothingness, no-thingness, deathless, lots of phrases to try to capture what is a sense of subjectivity. And then I started having you investigate, where does the outside meet the inside? Because that's also a really critical point. This is where we're going to eventually go with this. Where does the inside meet the outside? Where does the outside meet the inside? Well, it turns out that there's a collapse here, and it's a paradoxical parent to duality that actually is not dual. And I'm not going to say it's not two or it's not one, but there still is an apparent subjectivity. We'll get to that. So what I really did want to talk about, and unfortunately maybe wasted 5 minutes here summarizing the previous videos, just watch them, is identification with those thoughts, because this is where we get into trouble. The first noble truth of Buddhism is called dukkha. Dukkha has been translated as suffering. That's the most common translation of dukkha, but you could think of it as stress or dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease, uncomfortableness. It's, well, why do we suffer in that sense? Why do we feel a sense of dis-ease? Why do we feel tension in our bodies when, based on some of the experiences or memories that we have? Well, it's because we're identifying with our thoughts. The cause of suffering in the second noble truth is, I forget the Sanskrit word, but it's, we're deluded because of our desires, our delusions, but another way of saying it is we're believing our thoughts. We're identifying with our thoughts. And so, going back to those other videos, we create the separation. We turn ourselves and our thoughts just to see, to start making that mental distancing and that separation between our thoughts, to see that we are not those thoughts. They're just objects of perception. And then I had you pay attention to awareness. Well, the investigation here is observe your thoughts. Don't, when you get caught up daydreaming, thinking, it happens all the time. That's the practice. This is what mindfulness training really is about, is observing what's going on. Thoughts are arising. I'm attached to the thoughts. I'm following the thought. I got caught up in my thinking. I'm in my head. All those phrases, common phrases, are discussing really the stickiness of thoughts, but the fact that we can get stuck on those thoughts. And worse, we identify with what those thoughts are saying, supposedly, and think they're true. This is where identifications come in. We identify with our thoughts. We identify with our belief systems. And I like the phrase, beliefs are just thoughts we keep thinking. And we hold them dear to us. These could be political thoughts, religious thoughts, ethnic thoughts, national thoughts, career thoughts, marriage thoughts, relationship thoughts, thoughts about thoughts. We identify, we believe those thoughts. And so the next mindfulness practice here is allow yourself to relax and observe those thoughts. And to see where stickiness happens. It'll happen. Nothing wrong with that. We're human beings. This is how life is manifesting through us. But now you have the opportunity to investigate, to see through, especially when painful thoughts arise, conflicting thoughts, emotions are felt that shouldn't have happened to me. That's the thought, which is why you might be feeling very uncomfortable about a situation that might have occurred, whether it supposedly occurs out in the world. And there's a lot of situations out there happening in the world today that are causing quite extreme emotional reactions on people on both sides of the political spectrum. This is what's causing suffering, not just for us inside, but for other people, because we want other people to believe the same thoughts that we believe. But they're just thoughts. So as a meditation practice, when intense emotions arise, allow yourself to feel them. See if you could recognize the thought or thought patterns that are sort of creating that emotional disturbance. It could be self-esteem thoughts, could be, again, career thoughts. That shouldn't have happened to me. My wife, my husband, my child should not have said that or done that. I should not have said or done that. A lot of different ways we can get ourselves upset. And it doesn't mean that those feelings and those thought patterns are going to disappear, but they lose their power. That's the meditation. Let them come up, but don't repress or suppress them. In fact, the best time to meditate, which is often the most difficult time to meditate, is when those things are arising. And what thought patterns are occurring that allow the emotions and the thoughts to go hand in hand. And investigate too. How are you suffering in this moment? What are the thoughts that are arising that are causing your suffering? How are others suffering as a consequence of the thoughts that are arising? Because now that happens when you project onto other people how they should live their lives. This is identification. This is suffering. Yeah, identification is the root, is the cause of all suffering. And yet, we so feel the need. I got food on just a shadow. Identification is the cause of suffering. So investigate it. That's the meditation for this. Investigate thoughts. Investigate. Notice again, awareness of thoughts. Make it a sense object. And now look at it sort of with an objective eye. And feel it, especially if it's emotional. Feel what arises. There's no why. Don't investigate why. Why am I having this thought? Just let the thought, let the feeling exhaust itself. And it'll come back. you do it again, and it'll come back and you do it again. But it gets easier the more you allow yourself to see those thoughts as objects of perception. Again, this is an artificial separation, which I addressed in the last video, because it's still all arising within this supposed awareness, which really is none other than the perceptions of all these things. It's paradoxical. This is not a belief system. This is all these talks are pointers to your own experience and how you might be able to shift your perspective just enough that you're no longer seeing your thoughts as things that define who and what you are, that you're no longer identifying with those thoughts, thinking that that's you. You're no longer believing those thoughts. And now you could sort of objectively, because there is no inside or outside or subjective or objective, but sort of objectively just allow them to be experienced without their stickiness, without identifying or believing them. And when you see a thought, then oh wow, I think things should be this way, or I think I should be this way. See that. Make note of it. And that is the path to eliminating suffering and living your life with a sense of freedom and equanimity. Shit's gonna happen, but suffering is optional. So I'm gonna end there. I'll be back, and maybe in the next one we'll pick up on the mental distancing part 2 sequence. So for now.